Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for a reference live event featuring SteriMax. My name is Joshua Coleman with the North America Customer Success and Reference Team. Joining us today from SteriMax is Scott Newland, who will speak to their decision to rise from Microsoft Dynamics to SAP HANA Cloud Private Edition. Also joining us today is Russell Less from SAP partner NTT Data to help facilitate this discussion. I'll be asking Scott and Russell a few questions to warm them up for y'all, and then we'll open up the Q&A. Let's go ahead and get started with a couple quick introductions. Scott Newland began his career at SteriMax in 2015 and is responsible for finance, IT, business analytics, and risk management. Scott has over 20 years of progressive experience in finance and operations. Prior to joining SteriMax, Scott held critical roles in finance and strategic sourcing at Tim Hortons and Rogers. His significant experience and leadership in these roles supports the continued growth and maturity of the companies. Scott obtained his Bachelor of Business Administration from Austin Peay State University in Tennessee, while he also obtained an academic All-American status as a captain of the D1 golf team. Pretty impressive, Scott. Upon returning to Canada, Scott followed his other passion of financial analytics and obtained his Chartered Professional Accountant designation in 2004. Joining Scott today is Russell Less. Russell is a Vice President of Sales for NTT DATA Business Solutions Canada. He also has been working in the technology sector for over 30 years and in the SAP ecosystem since 1999. Since joining NTT in 2015, he's worked with a number of their Canadian clients across the life science and consumer industries on their journeys to S/4HANA, supporting their transformation roadmaps through expertise and commitment in driving success in complex business environments. Thank you both for joining us. So let's just go ahead and get started. And Scott, I'll ask you an easy one. Can you tell us a little bit about SteriMax and a little bit about your role with the company?
Yeah, thanks, Josh. So I've been at SteriMax, like you said, since 2015, about 9 years now. And it was my first foray into pharmaceuticals. It's a generic pharmaceutical company that we don't do any manufacturing of pharmaceuticals, but we are primarily focused on the Canadian market. We bring in product from all around the world. We have a full suite of services outside of manufacturing. So we have regulatory, quality, a lab inside our building to do testing, warehousing, sales and marketing, et cetera. And we've been growing over my time at the company from about 40 people to now 170 people. And we've tripled the size of the company in that time, at least probably quadrupled from a revenues perspective.
Very cool. Quadrupled business. That's pretty good. So you're doing a good job over there, it sounds like. So when you started, can you speak to some of the challenges that led your company to needing to upgrade their internal systems?
We were actually using a system called Microsoft Dynamics, or Navision, some people call it. And our environment, which was on-prem SQL Server environment, was end of life. The servers were end of life. And we kind of knew that was happening years in advance. And NTT approached us as a authorized seller of SAP. We kind of kicked the tires and said, you know what, we still got a little bit of time. But we started to noodle the idea of, okay, we have to make a decision at some point. We also had a lot of manual processes. We had a lot of challenges with the system and processes that were stopping us from kind of moving forward with the business. It's a non-GXP system or non-GMP. For those of you who know what that means, it's requirements for Health Canada, FDA, that were not being met. And every time we had an audit, we were like crossing our fingers they weren't going to ask us questions about our inventory management system. So, that was another major driver.
Scott, can you share the journey to your selection of RISE SAP S/4HANA Cloud Private Edition?
We started this, I want to say about 2 years ago, the official process of gathering the key opinion leaders and subject matter experts in the company to determine what are the major pain points. What are the things that we need to resolve with this new system? Is the existing system fine? Do we just need to kind of like update it? Or are there major, gaps? Then we identified a couple of the, 3 of the major providers that could satisfy those, brought in different players to support a demo process. And we actually did real live demos with our data. We then whittled it down to the final 2, and it was kind of a clear winner between SAP and the other company that we were working with. And to be honest with you, the key being not just the system, but also the implementation partner, which I know to be talking about that a little bit later, but the implementation partner was a key decision-making point for us as a company, making sure they understood our business and understood, what were the key things that we need to implement.
Excellent. And speaking of implementation partners, can you speak to the importance of choosing the correct implementation partner?
As far as I'm concerned, the implementation partner is the most important thing. You could have the best system in the world that you're implementing, if the company that's implementing it doesn't understand your business, or is trying to bite off too much, or is not asking hard questions and not challenging you as a company, you're going to potentially move down the wrong path and cause yourself more problems than you'll actually solve with the system. So it was clear that NTT knew our business. People knew life sciences. They knew the Health Canada requirements. It wasn't just, we know pharma, right? Pharma is a very big space. So from that perspective, they understood generic pharma. They understood the retail and competitive landscape in Canada. It really, really helped, make that decision that much easier for us.
Russell, question. I'm going to put you on a spot here. Can you speak to just talk about the system landscape when you came in? Like, what did it look like? High level, what did it look like? What were some of the systems that they had? What did you notice? And then talk about the landscape now and the big differences.
At the start, I think it's similar to what we often find in companies who've been, running an older system or running a, tier 2, tier 3 system. It was working. They had sort of a core system that was dealing with finance and at a basic level, but there were a lot of workarounds, lots of Excel, lots of kind of manual process, a little bit of dual entry between systems. So I think now that SAP is in place and, we're running S4 finance, inventory management, obviously, sales and distribution processes, a little bit of production planning and tied into the quality management, and then some helping manage the warehouse. And we've got a solution that we put in for rebate management, which is one of NTT's kind of specialties, given the amount of work we do in consumer industries, and including pharma. Generally, I would hope that we've been able to, significantly improve the automation, reduce the amount of manual effort in those processes. And I think, people are operating more efficiently, but I think from Scott's perspective, having a lot more visibility into what's going on, both, like day to day, as well as over time, looking at some strategic trends in the business that, that data just wasn't accessible before because it was kind of locked away in silos or just wasn't being captured at all. Is that fair to say, Scott?
Totally fair. Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head with the automation of processes. I mean, that's been a huge benefit to us so far. We still haven't even fully tapped into it. I mean, we're a year into our implementation and we're still learning and still, trying to optimize it. I've got a lot of list of benefits to the organization that we're starting to realize that ROI that we initially talked about when we were doing the business case, right? Our order accuracy has gone from 98%, which sounds great, but like when you do tens of thousands of orders a year, 98% to 99.98 or 998%, like we've literally had almost no order errors going forward. So, 2% of our business is millions of dollars. So that are, potentially going to come back in returns or be, scrapped. So it very quickly can improve your customer service, improve your bottom line by, saving returns and wastage.
So Scott mentioned how important it is to have an implementation partner, and it's more to him, it's more important than actual software, which I agree. Like, you guys become married for a little while because there's so much interaction going back and forth. Can you, in reverse, talk about what made Scott and his company successful as a customer?
Yeah, great question. And so the first thing I would say is that Scott was willing to put in the time and work to prepare himself and prepare the whole company. The high level business goals were clear across, not just from Scott's perspective, but when we talked to the other members of the executive team, you could tell that they had been thinking about this, been kind of planning together, and were on the same page. That's not always the case when we work from one customer to the next. And I think that, really was an important kind of foundational piece. And they'd also done a lot of work to kind of think about what kind of resources, what people would they need. We as much as SAP is kind of the foundation of the solutions that we implement, the really critical pieces where we actually spend most of our time, because it's where our work is on working with customers around getting their people and teams ready. And on the other side, helping them with their data and figuring out how that's going to move to the new system and how it's going to flow. And there's a lot of homework that companies can do in those areas before they pick and get started. The more they've done their homework in those areas and they understand how that relates to the business goals, it just makes everything go more smoothly and easily.
And speaking to customers over the years, two things that we noticed that really have been consistently underestimated are people change management and data management. What did you do to prepare for both of those processes?
I think kind of Russell alluded to it. It started at the top, right? I needed to kind of get the executive leadership and the ownership. It's a private company, right? This is a huge investment in dollars and time, and I needed to get them aligned with, this was something that was really important to them and the value of the company and the value of, just of our processes and ability to do what we need to do. Once we got aligned that we're going to be moving forward with this, then it was kind of the key subject matter experts and business leaders in the different departments. We did that through this RFP process, having somebody, knowing that we're moving forward, having somebody from every single one of those groups represented there and making sure that they're, that they had input, but then it wasn't done there. So before we even started the implementation, we have quarterly communication meetings with our entire company. I would get up and kind of have a little bit of a song and dance about our journey in SAP and what that would mean to people. And so that, when it was time to implement, this was no surprise to people. Obviously we did lots of training as a part of that. It was a well thought up and a long-term change management process. We weren't trying to ram this down people's throats at all. We wanted to make sure it was as inclusive and communicative as possible.
And as far as data management, how did you guys handle that?
We knew that we had to do the data cleansing and data cataloging and getting ready for the implementation. What we didn't anticipate was that nobody wanted to do it, right? Like, data cleansing is not the job you bring in somebody off the street to do for your organization. You have to have the people who know your company do your data cleansing. We didn't really budget the time and put the resources on that until a little bit later on in the project, which put some risk into the project for sure. Fortunately, we put like a team on it and really focused their effort on kind of doubling down on cleansing the data. We did not really plan the data governance component of it. I'm not saying we were in a terrible position, but we were playing a little bit of catch up, and it caused just some inefficiency when we went live, trying to create a new product, for example. We're used to a position where you want a new product code? I'll just make one up for you right now and just give it to you, right? And now we had controls. The system was going to generate the product code for us. Great, we want that. We got to make sure we have all this information. Well, we didn't even know all those fields when we went live. There's new information we have now about products we hadn't known, like Russell alluded to it before. There's more insight and value to having different data parameters or metadata that we had no idea of before. So we kind of had to gather that and pull that all together before we go live.
That's why we're here. I like to hear when there's challenges, because it's real. So people are going to have the same issues and questions. So it's good. So thank you for pointing that out. How did adopting a cloud-based solution improve ways of working, innovating, and collaborating with others within your organization?
With the cloud environment, all of our approval processes, and this is partly also just the new S/4HANA space. It allows people to work more mobilely. Work from home is much easier, and it's a scalable environment that just kind of allows us to continue to grow and not worry about, okay, we need a new server, we need to add more memory, whatever. It's all taken care of.
That's awesome. So we do have a question. How long was your project from kickoff to go live? And was it a big bang or phased?
Once we made the decision, that was around May, June of 2022. SAP created the S/4HANA cloud environment. NTT took some of our real data, provisioned that into the environment. So we were actually, this was novel for us. We were designing using our real information. That design phase took, I want to say, about 2 months. Then there was some like a data phase, and while NTT was working on the realize phase, which is actually the implementation. And then in around January, once we had started putting our real, our full data set into the system, we started the integration testing. That was where we originally had some major problems as an organization, determining who's going to do what and if we're going to be able to handle it. And NTT Data jumped right in. They were able to help us with the integration testing and get that completed on time and get us back on track with their schedule. And the cost was minimal compared to delaying the project and pushing it out. So that was a huge help. And we were able to then do the user acceptance testing in, I want to say, around April. And we went live on June 1st. And our first order, like that weekend after June 1st, we said, everybody be ready. You're going to be coming in on the weekend. We're going to be, fixing and making sure it works. And it was like a non-event. It was like, yeah, this is how we pick an order. We're going to go and we followed them through the warehouse. They picked it. They're ready. Okay, put it on. And we're going to ship this order on Monday, and we're ready to ship it. And everything worked. So it was a testament to the work and using Enable Now from training purposes, and people understood their roles.
You mentioned Enable Now. Can you explain a little bit what that is and how and why it was important to you and your company?
So Enable Now allows us to actually have videos, training procedures, SOPs, walkthroughs of our process, and somebody can actually click on, how do I do this? And it takes you through the steps. And then you can actually follow along on your computer, or you can actually, it makes you, you can do some kind of low practice training sessions in the tool, so that you're confident when you go into the real, production environment, you're doing all the steps, you're following things properly.
Sounds like a really important tool. So that's good. Thank you for sharing that. Russell, question for you. Well, it's a question, but I think you could probably answer this a little stronger because you work with life science companies and you implemented public and private. Is it due to the nature of your business that you chose private cloud over public?
Scott mentioned at the top about GMP or GXP requirements. It's a regulatory requirement that at its foundation, it's important to have a dedicated system. And it's also problematic if you're getting, regularly scheduled updates without having some controls over that. But other than that, from a functionality perspective, public cloud, would have worked.
Scott, you could probably answer this one. When you identified the requirements and gaps and then evaluated against the 3 other ERP companies that you're looking into, were they all able to satisfy all the requirements, or did they mostly meet the needs within the system with some customization and configurations required?
They were not all able to meet the requirements right out of the gate. A couple of them required some customizations, but there was a path forward to meet the requirements. Where it came down to the decision making was that we had the confidence in SAP, and more importantly, the implementation partner that was with that. So it wasn't like we picked an implementation partner and then we said, find us a system. We had various companies coming to us with their system of choice, right? So NTT is coming to us with SAP. There was another company coming to us with NetSuite, Oracle. We had, we looked at Microsoft had a system. So we were looking at all the kind of key players, and it just came down to the mixture of both the system and the implementation partner.
And I will say this, and I probably shouldn't, but it's important. SAP wasn't the cheapest.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it was uncompetitive. It was in the ballpark. It wasn't like miles difference, but I was fortunate, that I took the time as well to educate the leadership that this is not a commodity service here. This is like something that you're going to live with for the next 20 years. You better make sure you're investing in the right partner and player.
Another question, were you able to create new jobs after implementing the new SAP system? Additionally, how do you perceive the current jobs in context of new AI-driven world? Great question.
Yeah, so I'd say we created jobs probably before the implementation, because we knew that this was changing. This is transformational from that perspective. There were some new jobs that were required in IT, master data governance. We didn't even, like governance of master data. What was that before, right? So we really created a small team, for our company, 2 people. But the thought is there's going to be jobs that are probably going to be, I won't say eliminated, but not created, because we're able to scale up for the organization. That was part of the ROI, is we're making ourselves more efficient. So we're not cutting jobs, but we're not necessarily having to create as many jobs in certain areas. But then there's opportunities in IT and finance. We're doing we're implementing SAC right now, SAP Analytics Cloud, and we've created a few jobs in that to build more visualizations of our data, better understanding of our company, and hopefully give us more opportunity to grow.
Another question, how is the SAP system managed today? Is there a team? If so, how large? Or is it spread out through a subject matter expert across the company?
I'll call it a hybrid a little bit. So we have an IT systems administrator for our internal team. We also we utilize NTT Data for an annual maintenance service package. So if there's ever any issues or any tweaks we need to make, we kind of have that built into our relationship with NTT Data. We have system developers in-house to do any type of back-end work that needs to be done, or any security. Master data governance is where I would say it's more distributed. Finance has its banking data that maintains. The commercial team has customer data they maintain. They will then send those requests in through master data to make sure there's no duplication, that that we're not we're making sure all the right fields are entered. And so that's where kind of each of the departments kind of handles their own data, but master data puts controls on that and also checks to make sure, hey, we've got certain data elements coming into the system that don't have maybe master data updated that needs to be updated. So they kind of hold the team accountable. So
you mentioned GXP. So with any life sciences implementation, you need to look into GXP services. How did you and NTT address that?
We utilize a company that we've utilized even in our past life, and this person happens to be an expert in Canadian GXP validation. That's how we kind of satisfied the needs to ensure that we were capturing all the GXP elements and really documenting it.
You said that your project, you had already started really kind of evaluating making the change in 2018, but the business wasn't ready. In my understanding, just sort of a trajectory, right, of business and technology inflation that happens every year that you prolong the implementation and moving to the new technology, because there's always going to be new things coming in, things being added. So if you were able to go back now, what would you have done differently to be able to contend with that change management? And change inflation is really what I see it as, right? Where it's moving faster and faster every single year. How do you keep all of the ships still sailing in the same course?
What we really, as a company, determined was that the core was our major thing we wanted to implement. We looked at all this suite of potential things we could be implementing, and trust me, there's so many potential modules and automation and whatnot you can build. And you can get enticed by that and think, oh my gosh, we can't fall behind. We have to do all these, add all these bells and whistles so we can be super efficient and but I would highly recommend you don't bite off too much and focus on the those key elements to make your business successful. I don't know if that makes sense, Russell.
No, it does. And one of the things that we often tell customers as they're getting started, and I think you're experiencing now, is look, once you're on the platform and stable, the incremental additions can come That's the great thing about, about these cloud systems and the way SAP works now is, once you've done that big move into RISE, then doing, adding AI capabilities, adding analytics, it's much easier. And sometimes it's easier and less risky and less expensive to do those things afterwards in a second phase than to try to pack too much into that, initial implementation where, as you said, you don't want to bite off more than you can digest, because that's when you get yourselves into trouble.
How is your company currently utilizing or planning to utilize AI?
I would say we're probably more dipping our toes into AI at the moment. We are implementing a co-pilot pilot internally, where we're trying to put a box around AI to an extent. Once you give AI access to your data, it will find data that you don't even know exists. And so the concerns are, if you don't know how secure your internal data is in your shared drive infrastructure and whatever, then you may want to just kind of take that a little lightly. So we're starting with it inside of our kind of Microsoft Office environment. And one of the areas is in our it's called PV, pharmacovigilance. When you get call it complaints or any type of adverse reactions, they have to do certain documentation. So there's a way that they can utilize AI to kind of help make that process a lot more efficient. So that's one of the areas we're using it. I think regulatory is a way that we could potentially use it, but I think we're starting with a smaller environment and trying to kind of grow on that, similar to SAP, right? Start with what we can control and then kind of build on that.
You mentioned earlier your private company. What was the journey like to secure significant financial approval from the executive leadership team or the owners?
NTT Data provide us with what you generally are going to experience in savings, and whether it be EDI costs, invoicing, or just your time spent on it. And you can kind of take that and scale it to your organization, whether you've got X number of invoices times whatever. And so we did some math on that. We did some work on the risks. It ended up working out that there was, after all these, little things adding up, and, you have a significant amount of business, and we have to make it, we had to move to another solution in the first place, right? We had to move to one. It was pretty easy choice to get the buy-in from executives.
I know we're at time, but do you mind if I ask one more question?
Sure.
Okay. This could go for both y'all. If you had to do it all over again, what would be the top things that you would do differently?
Sure. I would definitely have focused more on the data cleansing and governance in the beginning. And I had a little bit of issue with buy-in from one department. And it was because they didn't have the resources, and then there was always something more important. And it slowed us down. And I would have said that I think I could have done a better job just getting them on board and seeing the importance of kind of having those dedicated resources.
And Russell, how about you from a partner perspective?
Hindsight being 2020, spending more time on the data stream, even through the sales cycle, and really looking at not just the governance piece that comes out of it, but the analytics that comes out of it, to make sure that we're and I think Scott and his team are in a good place. But if we could do it again, would have tried to get them there 6-9 months earlier in terms of what they're doing now with some of the analytics in the system.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time and expertise. And we're looking forward to seeing everybody on the next Reference Live event.